The price of oil has collapsed to a record low.
We've never really seen anything like it.
WTI this morning down more than 35%.
A group of traders from Essex, just outside London, who rode the crash to a $660 million profit.
We pushed each other so hard for years for this one moment, and we fucking blitzed it, boys. It's April 20th, 2020, a day that shocked the global financial system.
US oil prices went into negative territory for the first time in history last month, amid the deepest fall in demand in 25 years.
You'll never see that again in history, I don't believe. They have to pay you to take their oil.
The collapse in demand is completely unprecedented.
We're very fortunate to have a very large trading organization and have been able to find a home for our crude, a physical home for our crude, but not everyone is that fortunate.
The day oil prices went negative for the first time in history, a group of traders from Essex, England, dubbed the Essex Boys, pulled off a staggering $700 million trade in a matter of hours. Their leader, Paul Cummins, a man known as Cuddles. How did a bunch of working class lads from Essex outplay Wall Street, destroy market expectations, and trigger a legal firestorm that is still unfolding today? This is the story of the Essex Boys and the greatest trade in oil history. Stick around because this story is crazy. Before the Essex Boys took Wall Street by storm, before they made history with the biggest oil trade the world has ever seen, they were just a group of working class lads trying to make a name for themselves in one of the most brutal industries on earth, trading. Their leader, Paul Cummins, a man known by an ironic nickname in the industry, Cuddles. Born and raised in Essex, England, Paul Cummins wasn't your typical finance guy. He wasn't groomed in the Ivy League halls or Harvard or Cambridge. He didn't sit in Wall Street's boardroom sipping espressos and discussing economic theories. No, he learned his trade the hard way on the brutal no-mercy trading floors of London's International Petroleum Exchange. Back in the 1990s and early 2000s, trading wasn't done on sleek computer screens. It was a physical battle of wits, speed and aggression. The trading pits of the IPE, International Petroleum Exchange, were a war zone. It was loud, it was chaotic, and it was dominated by big personalities. Here, only the toughest survived, the weak they got eaten alive. And Paul Cummins, Cuddles, was one of the toughest. This was a place where quick thinking and balls of steel made the difference between making $100,000 before lunch or losing your entire fortune in a single bad trade. Cummins thrived here. He had a natural instinct for the markets. He knew when to push, when to hold, and when to strike. And he wasn't alone. Around him was a band of like-minded traders, most of them from Essex, who shared his hunger for risk and reward. Together, they formed a tight-knit trading crew, young, ambitious, and willing to take risks that most traders wouldn't dare touch. They weren't just colleagues, they were a brotherhood, and they would soon shake the financial world. But first, the industry they had built their careers on was about to change forever. By 2005, the golden era of the trading pits was coming to an end. Technology was taking over. Algorithmic trading, high-frequency trading, computers were faster, smarter, and they didn't get emotional. Suddenly, pit traders were obsolete. Many of Cummins' old colleagues quit the game altogether. They went into real estate, opened bars, or just disappeared from the world of finance. But Cummins wasn't done yet. Instead of walking away, he adapted. He moved away from the giant firms and started trading independently, along with a group of young, hungry traders, many of whom he personally mentored. That group, Vega Capital London. Unlike Wall Street hedge funds, Vega Capital wasn't a corporate empire. It was more like a trading arcade. This was a group of independent traders, all using their own capital, but sharing knowledge, strategies, and market insights. They were tight-knit, all coming from a similar background, working-class guys who had climbed their way into the world of high-stakes trading. And most importantly, they were making serious money. They weren't answering to banks or institutions, they traded their own way with their own rules, but more than anything, they were risk takers. They lived for the adrenaline of the markets. They weren't afraid of big trades, high stakes, and massive risks. And in April 2020, they were about to make the biggest trade of their lives, a trade that would stun the world. The perfect storm was about to start. And with that, this $700 million trade. The storm was brewing, but this wasn't a hurricane, it wasn't a stock market crash, it was something far bigger, something that would bring the global oil industry to its knees. It was April 2020, the world was in chaos. Governments had locked down entire countries, businesses shuttered, flights were grounded, millions of cars sat unused in driveways. The global economy had frozen overnight, and the demand for oil, it disappeared. Oil, the lifeblood of the global economy, was no longer needed. The world simply stopped using it, and when demand collapses, so do prices. What happened next set the stage for one of the most historic trades in history. But COVID-19 wasn't the only problem. Just weeks before the pandemic went global, two of the biggest oil-producing nations, Russia and Saudi Arabia, had started a brutal price war.
Market turmoil is about more than just the virus. Oil prices suffered a historic collapse late Sunday after Saudi Arabia shocked the market by launching a price war against one-time ally Russia.
Saudi Arabia, the king of oil, wanted to cut production to support prices, but Russia, they refused. In retaliation, Saudi Arabia flooded the markets with millions of extra barrels of crude oil, crashing prices and crushing competitors. The result? A glut of oil so big that storage tanks around the world began to overflow. With demand at record lows and supply at record highs, oil prices were in freefall, and then became April 20th, 2020, the day oil did the unthinkable. To understand what happened on that fateful day, we need to talk about how oil futures contracts work. Oil isn't traded like a normal stock. Instead, traders buy and sell futures contracts, agreements to buy oil at a future date at a set price. The May 2020 WTI crude oil contract was about to expire. Anyone still holding a contract after expiration wouldn't just be making a bet on oil's price. They would be legally required to take physical delivery of 1,000 barrels of crude oil. And here was the problem. There was nowhere left to put it. In Cushing, Oklahoma, where most of these contracts are settled, were completely full. The oil had nowhere to go. As the deadline approached, traders realized they were trapped. If they didn't sell their contracts, they would have to physically take delivery of oil they couldn't store. So they panicked. They sold at any price they could get. And that's when the Essex boys saw their moment. Back in the small town of Loughton, Essex, Paul Commins and his team at Vega Capital were watching closely. They knew exactly what was happening. The big players on Wall Street weren't reacting fast enough, but Commins and his Essex traders, they were ready to strike. Their strategy? Trading at settlement, also known as TAS. TAS orders allows traders to bet on the final settlement price of oil without needing to hold contracts overnight. So here's what they did. They piled into TAS contracts, betting that the closing price would collapse even further. Then they kept selling and selling and selling. They fed the panic. In the last half hour, between 96 and 99% of their trades were moving in the exact same direction. They kept selling harder and harder, driving prices lower and lower. And then at 2:08 p.m., the impossible happened. For the first time in history, oil prices collapse below zero.
We've never seen anything like it, period, in terms of the contraction of the global economy.
It meant sellers had to pay buyers to take oil off their hands. The Essex boys had just made history, pocketing over $700 million in a single day.
The price of crude briefly hit minus $37 a barrel. For one group of traders operating from a small office, it was a very, very profitable day.
It was happening. After years of hustling, after surviving the brutal world of London's trading pits, after watching the world's oil market collapse, the Essex boys were ready to make history. They weren't just watching the crash, they were engineering it. In a single afternoon, Paul Commins and his team at Vega Capital London executed one of the most shocking and controversial trades in financial history. By the time the dust settled, they had pocketed nearly $700 million in just a few hours. But as they celebrated across the world, the financial industry was in shock, because what had just happened had never been seen before, and Wall Street was about to demand answers. The fallout was coming, and this was far from over. But while they were celebrating, the world was watching, and Wall Street wanted revenge. What followed was one of the biggest financial investigations in recent history. Accusations of market manipulations, lawsuits, and the looming threat of criminal charges. But through it all, the Essex boys remained untouchable. So what really happened after that legendary day? Where are they now? And will they ever face justice? As the news spread, the financial world demanded answers. How did a group of independent traders operating from a small office in Essex wipe out billions from the global oil market? The damage wasn't just limited to oil traders. Ordinary investors, retirement funds, and even entire financial institutions lost money because of that day. Some funds had their entire portfolios destroyed. Interactive Brokers, one of the biggest online trading platforms, lost $104 million in a single day, simply because their systems couldn't process negative oil prices. The regulators stepped in. The CFTC, the FBI, and even the US Attorney's Office wanted to know. And that's when the messages surfaced. Just keep selling at every 5 points. Everyone is going to be short and have ammo. Fucking mental. I want to see negative WTI prices. These weren't just random messages, they were evidence, proof that these traders weren't just reacting to the market, they were orchestrating it. A lawsuit was filed by Mish International Monetary, a US metals trading firm that lost millions during the oil crash. Their accusation? Market manipulation. But while lawyers prepared their case, the Essex boys were celebrating. The traders had one big defense. They argued they had done nothing illegal. They just saw an opportunity and took it. The financial world was split. Some called them criminals, others called them brilliant. But in 2022, a US judge ruled that there was enough evidence to take 8 of the 12 traders to trial. And yet, none of them have been arrested. To this day, none of them have faced criminal charges. Because according to them, they didn't break any laws. So what's next? Will they ever be held accountable, or did they really just pull off the greatest trade in history, banking over $700 million in a day? Was this market manipulation or genius trading? What do you think? Let us know in the comments, and make sure you subscribe because this story isn't over yet. If you're really enjoying the success stories of traders throughout the investment world, then be sure to check out this video with Ray Dalio and how he built the largest hedge fund in the world of $150 billion.